So in this lesson, we're going to break down the finished page, and in the process, I'm going to show you the Chrome developer tools, which are super useful. So we're going to open our finished page if you haven't done that yet. So you can go to the portfolio folder, choose finished, and then open the index.html. You can either just drag and drop it into Chrome, double click if it's set as your default browser, or from the file menu, you can also choose open file, and then navigate to that finished folder and click open here. So once we have that page open, what we're going to do is we're going to right click or control click if you have a trackpad, or click using two fingers, and then we're going to choose this inspect or inspect element. If you have a Dutch version of macOS, the names might be slightly different, but you'll find it. So, and once we open it, we're greeted with a bunch of stuff here, and don't worry, we won't be using most of it, but there's one. So you see that it's divided into these tabs, and the tab that we're mostly concerned about now is this elements tab. And this elements tab is super important because it shows you the structure of the page. So we note that a page consists of elements or tags that are nested into each other. So we start with an HTML tag. Then inside there's a head tag, which we don't see on the page. Then there's a body tag. And then we have our header tag, we have our section tag. And note as I go over these that the elements are highlighted, so I can see which element I hover over then. So there's a one-to-one correspondence with an element on the page, and then the way that we see it represented here as this sort of tree structure. Some of the elements might not be visible. So for example, the gallery element might not be visible. So we just scroll down and then we can see that element here. And you of course can open these up for more detail. So for example, we can open this section up, we can see the H2 here, we can see the gallery wrap and so forth. And then we have all the different images here one by one. So just try that out if you want. And this is also live. So what that means is I can go here and for example, in the header, I can click that open. Here it says portfolio. I can double click here and I can rename that. I can put something else here. So these changes are live. And interestingly, this doesn't only work on our site. So for example, if you open the BBC News site, we can also just right click here, something, and then open that up and then just change the text to say whatever. And of course, we're not really hacking the BBC here. Instead, what we're doing is just changing our local copy, our local version of that site. So as soon as we refresh the page here, we get the old version back from the site of the BBC, and then we get their contents back, right? So it's just a copy that we store locally in memory of our computer. Now, another important thing here is this little device icon, this toggle device toolbar. And so if we click that, what happens is that our page instantly becomes smaller. We have this responsive layout tools that we can use here. And you can see here that we can choose the size of, or we can choose a device that our browser is going to emulate, basically. So we can say, okay, this is an iPhone 6 or 7 or 8, whatever, or an iPhone 10. And then you'll see that it sort of shrinks down the page so that we can see how what the page will look like on a smaller screen. We can also press these buttons here and we can sort of get an overview of what the page looks like, or we can just drag these things around. So this is really useful because we're going to use an approach called mobile first, which means we'll make the mobile version of our site first. And so this allows us to design things. And note that things change, right? So if at some point the page becomes small, then now these elements appear below each other instead of next to each other. This is also zoomed to 50%. So if you change it to 100%, you see how the page actually looks like. So it's not that small, actually. On the right side of our toolbar here, so of our Chrome inspector tools, we see the styles that apply to that specific element. So in this case, for example, I'm hovering over this H1, And you see that I have here header H1. So this is the H1 inside of the header. So not all of the H1s, just the ones that are in the header, which is just this one. And then you see all these properties. And again, these are live. So if we change the font size to 40, for example, you see that text grows bigger. We can also press enter and then use even the scroll wheel to make this bigger or smaller if you want to, or use the up and down keys on our keyboard. So there's lots of things that we can try out. We can do that with line height. You can also do that with colors. So for example, if we click the header here, you see that it has a background property here. So you can click that. We can choose another color if we want to. Again, all of these changes are not persisted. They're not saved on the page. As soon as we refresh, we just see the old page back. But it's important to know or to explore. This is super useful to see what all the rules are. So what I want you to do now at the end of this video is just explore with this thing. Just go through the whole thing and see what happens if we click elements. And specifically, I want you to focus on this one. So this is as you can see, this is a paragraph with a P. This is also a paragraph, but you see that this one has this thing called class equals big. So there's some extra information that we give here. So it's not a normal paragraph, it's a big paragraph. Now the browser doesn't know what big means, but we have our own special styling here that says, okay, big means these things. And you see that these styles still apply, even though they're strike through. So there's those no longer apply, but you sort of have to explore what happens if we change these values, or what happens if we change these values. What happens if so we can also click here on empty space and just make the color red, for example. What happens here? You see that the text here changes red as well. Why is that? So sort of go through things, scroll down the page, start playing around with it. You can't break anything because it's again not the actual site that we're doing here. It's just our local copy. So just play around with the whole thing and see which elements affect what.